Strings of Malice, Book 1. Snowflake in an Alley. An Old Mother Nonsense Story. Chapter 22. A Ball. The chapel had been entirely transformed. The curtains had been changed to white ones, and hung open to reveal a clear night sky and a rising full moon. Tables had been laid out with enough food to feed an army, and roses decorated just about every surface. The space was packed with people. The number of worshippers had grown exponentially in the last week, and Irinka wondered just where they had all been hiding until now. Some of them must have surely been new, and the nobles that flocked among them were only recognizable because their garb came in a variety of colors, while the thorns had stuck to their traditional black. From the doorway, she caught sight of Dr. Gascares, walking around and talking to everyone and anyone, all smiles and grand gestures, while Nimue numbly floated along beside him. She moved like a puppet whose strings had been cut. It was disturbing to see just how utterly hollow the woman had become, though the mouse seemed to be the only one who noticed. Everyone was drinking some fancy bubbly thing the girl couldn't pronounce from crystal glasses. Music floated around them from somewhere unseen, cheery and utterly disconnected from how Irinka felt in her own skin and situation. It was too much. She didn't want to go in. She needed air. She had been determined to address the problem to the vampire directly, considering none of her company were bloody well listening to her. But so many people, every one of them going about like this wasn't entirely unnatural, suddenly terrified her. She tore herself away from her escort, turned to run but bumped into the arms of a boy she didn't recognize. She didn't see the thorn behind her leave, though she did see the boy wave her off, with a superiority only wielded by those who had been born with it. He couldn't have been much older than her, but he blocked her escape and she felt herself becoming dizzy. She couldn't breathe. He caught her about her arms and she only came back to herself when she recognized the shape of his mouth, insisting that she breathe. She did, and he smiled. Again. His mouth formed the single word. She did. Again? He urged, pulling her shoulders up a little to encourage her. That's it. In and out. The cacophony of sound slowly began fading into the background as the boy eased her out of the panic attack she had been on the verge of falling into. It was still there, along with the scent of flowers and the warmth from so many bodies around them. But the little bubble he had created set it all back from them, and the relief must have shown on her face, because he began to speak. There we are, the boy told her warmly. His grip on her arms eased, just enough to make sure she wouldn't fall over, before slowly letting her go.
Ta,
she muttered, backing up a step when he didn't. You're welcome. He smiled, white teeth and warm eyes friendly as he guessed. I suppose this is all a little overwhelming for you? She nodded, feeling unnaturally self-conscious that she was clearly so far out of her depth.
I'm not really used to this kind of thing.
Ah, you must be the doll. He all but beamed, stepping in to close the gap she had made. Her brows furrowed into a frown at the use of the name the White Rose had unceremoniously bestowed upon her. For once, someone in this risk hole didn't ignore her reaction entirely, and he continued to catch her off guard. Irinka Reed, right? She nodded slowly.
And you are?
She asked, before her hands came up to stall his answer.
If you say thorn, I'm walking away.
No, I haven't been planted in the garden of thorns yet, he told her with a laugh, and the sound wasn't entirely unpleasant. In fact, it was rather nice. The most natural she'd heard in her entire time here, in fact. His head cocked forward and he offered her a small bow. The movement was obviously inherent, though the curve of his mouth made it seem more in jest than those around them.
My name is Durlan, milady. Durlan Irith.
He introduced himself dramatically. Irinka almost chuckled at his antics, but someone bumped into her back, reminding her of where she was, and the type of people who had come here. Her mind wandered back to all the letters she had passed off, and wondered how many of them had been for this very night.
Well, Mr. Irith,
She mumbled, offering a stiff bow of her own.
if you don't mind, I've shown my face and now I just want to get out of here.
She made to walk past him, but his hands going up stopped her.
Mr. Irith makes me sound like an old man.
The boy chuckled, not moving out of her way.
Please call me Durlan.
Irinka rolled her eyes and sidestepped him.
Goodbye, Durlan.
She drawled, but came up short when his hand caught her elbow and spun her back around.
Don't touch me.
She hissed instinctively. To his credit, he let go instantly.
I shouldn't have done that.
Durlan apologized quickly.
I'm sorry if you feel I was out of bounds, but please don't leave.
I really don't want to be here.
She admitted pointedly.
With all offense, if you're here to become a part of this cult, I really don't want to get to know you either.
The boy blinked at her owlishly before he lowered his hands with a soft chuckle and gestured vaguely to the crowd behind her.
That would be my parents.
He told her like he was admitting something embarrassing.
I'm only here because the last time they left me home unsupervised, I may have accidentally burned down the family mansion trying to bake cookies.
The laugh that escaped the girl surprised even herself, though she covered it quickly.
If you're the son of nobles, don't you have people to cook for you?
She asked, struggling to keep the mirth from her voice. He shrugged, going for an only slightly failing nonchalant.
Well, the cookies were for a girl. I heard they were her favorites, so I wanted to try my hand at making them.
He trailed off as he looked down at the floor bashfully.
I was so embarrassed by it all. I never did end up asking if she might return my feelings.
Sounds like something out of a story.
The girl returned, rolling her eyes. Every story Lady Rosalind had spewed since their arrival had been idyllic like that. It had lost its charm all too quickly. For a second, it looked like Durlan's eyebrows twitched towards a frown, but his expression quickly shifted into something pleading.
Well, considering I did make you laugh, don't you want to stay a while and keep me company? I doubt I will find anyone else here to really talk to, and I can keep the thorns from bothering you.
He added quickly when her smile dropped into suspicion.
You don't seem to like them very much, and from what I've heard, Lady Rosalind Nightshade gets cranky without her favorites around.
He whispered the last part so softly that Irinka struggled to hear it over the music, but it was what finally convinced her. At least there was one somewhat normal person here tonight she could talk to. Despite the obvious, Irinka actually found herself having fun. Durlan had a morbid sense of humor and had been fascinated by her quirks. He never allowed her cup to be empty, staunchly glared at anyone who came up to her, save for the doctor, who smiled that stupid false smile and congratulated her on finding such a dashing chaperone. She had offered the doctor some very unladylike words before her new friend had quickly escorted her away. His confusion at her rudeness was quickly fixed when she explained to him that the man was under some kind of spell to make him so uncharacteristically generic. Durlan had asked what she meant, and the bracelets didn't stop her from telling him how the man had changed. Tentatively at first, and then more conspiratorially when the magic didn't flare. She told him of how they had come to be in the Temple of the White Rose, obviously leaving out everything before they set off for Monkakus. She told him about how boring it was to be here, and how she wanted nothing more than to leave with her brother and her friends, that she would do so when she found the chance. Durlan had given her a nervous smile and said he'd watch himself. Irinka found herself hoping the young man would be all right, and that his parents would leave this place with their minds intact. The music paused long enough that, when it began again, it drew the attention of everyone in the room. Lady Rosalind Nightshade had finally arrived to her own party. Irinka would have thought her a real princess, in her snow-white gown and diamond-encrusted crown, if she had known what the woman was. The White Rose glided into the space, slowly, deliberately, and people parted for her like water for a ship, bowing and dipping as she passed. She greeted every one of her guests by name, but paused when she got to Irinka and the girl didn't move. Derlin, grabbing her wrist tightly, surprised her enough that she didn't step back when she'd been meaning to. The Rose leaned in to embrace the girl warmly, and Irinka would have screamed at her, but now the magic around her wrists kept her lips tightly shut. The woman pulled back before reaching out to her, and Irinka's blood ran cold when Lady Rosalind's warm hand cupped her cheek. A pressure built in the mouse's chest. She wanted to demand that the woman get her hands off of her and stop bloody drinking from her brother, but her defiance turned swiftly into fear when the Rose smiled at her. Irinka felt the magic ease off, though she dared not speak. "My precious little doll," the White Rose purred in that whisper way she liked to do, the kind of whisper that made her conversation entirely public. "You look so pretty tonight. Have you been having fun?" Her dark eyes flickered momentarily over to the boy beside her. "If this one is bothering you, I can see to his evisceration." The tension the promise put in the air was physically palpable. Gods damn it. Irinka swallowed thickly before parroting words the woman had often used when praising her brother.
"He's been the perfect gentleman,"
she offered meekly. Internally, she cursed herself for her own cowardice. She had pictured her blade finding a mark in the woman's heart, but Derlin didn't deserve the backlash. He was innocent in all this, dragged into this dangerous place by parents stupid enough to have indebted themselves to a demon masquerading as an angel. Spitefully, the girl reasoned that she was better off without parents, and that he was the poorer one for it. Irinka clenched her fists and bit down on the inside of her cheek as she admitted softly.
"Please?"
She stammered out, not able to look the woman in the eye.
"His company's the reason I've been having fun tonight."
The pressure around them eased in an instant when Lady Rosalind smiled happily and leaned in to kiss the girl on the forehead. "Wonderful," she declared, and there was an almost audible sigh. An odd mix of both relief and disappointment silently hummed through the ballroom. Her gaze left the doll to travel the length of her companion. "Look after my doll well, Master Irith." She beamed approvingly at Derlin, and the man smiled charmingly in return. "Naturally, my lady." The poor thing was shaking slightly, but he didn't let the fear make it into his voice. Irinka couldn't deny she was impressed. Maybe it did pay to come from high society when dealing with entitled vampires. Lunrith eased out of the crowd, and the Rose's attention was quickly diverted to her champion when he offered her his hand. She made a show of becoming flustered at the invitation, took it when the music just so happened to flare again when their hands touched, and the man drew her into a dance. Irinka silently cursed her brother for not being there sooner, for making her endure such humiliation in front of so many people. Hooded stranger's words be damned then. If he was prepared to stay here forever as a pet to the devil woman, that was on him. She was out of here. The girl had every intention of abandoning the charade and walking directly out the front door, but her exit was halted by the grip Derlin still had on her wrist, and his eyes were pleading. "Please don't," he whispered softly, shakily. Her previous pleasant mood officially ruined, Irinka relented grumpily.
"Oh, I need a drink."
Derla nodded quickly and moved her hand to link into his elbow before he led her away from the empty space that had been created for the Roses' dance.
Thank you,
he whispered once they'd moved to the back of the watching crowd.
Don't.
She grumbled in return, dejectedly leaning against the edge of a table lined with bowls of punch and bottles of wine.
She knows your face now. If I vanished tonight, it would be your head on the chopping block. You seem like a decent guy, it wouldn't be fair.
Oh, how terrible.
He cocked his head and offered her a cheeky smile, along with a new glass of something clear and pink.
Looks like you're stuck protecting me now. At least I'm the reason you were having fun tonight.
Embarrassment had flooded Irinka's face at the reminder of what she had said, so she shoved him. But it only made him laugh more, and the sound calmed her. Perhaps she could stay one more night. It wouldn't really make a difference. They drank and he tried to teach her to dance. They ate and he asked about her life before the White Rose. They talked and he told her she was pretty. She rolled her eyes and he didn't push it enough to make her truly uncomfortable. He noticed that her brother didn't seem to be having fun, and she noticed Lanrith's eyes were no longer misted over, and that they found their way over to her often. She was still upset with him, so she chose to ignore him. She could have a night of fun, while he dealt with the Rose for once. Derlin pointed out a plethora of powerful people in attendance, and she was informed that the way they had all become powerful was due to the favors the White Rose had extended to their families some centuries ago. All the nobles knew of her cult and her strangeness. They also knew she was dangerous, but powerful, smart, and connected despite her absence. When they had received her letters, inviting them to a ball, the ones who had come were those not stupid enough to forget that she was the reason for their family's prestige and privilege.
I notice a few are missing,
he whispered to her, specifically pointing out the ambassador of Palox.
I'll bet money that Palox will need a new heir come next week.
Irinka frowned and quickly reached out to push the boy's pointing hand down.
Don't point things out that could get people in trouble. Do you want to end up in the back alley ditch?
She reprimanded him with a hushed hiss.
Maybe no one will notice.
You're very sweet, Irinka.
Derlin smiled at her, shifting his arm smoothly so he could take her hand.
Read the room. See how everyone is subtly avoiding him? The sheen of sweat on his brow from worry? He will not be leaving here tonight unscathed.
All because his master didn't come to some stupid party.
She frowned, recognizing the bid for privacy as he positioned their hands in front of their faces when he leaned over. He nodded, a small smile on his lips at her simple understanding of the way things worked in the world.
All because his master didn't come to some stupid party,
he confirmed. His breath smelled like the berries in the punch this close.
You must remember that not a single unplanted person here has met the White Rose before tonight. She has been asleep for a long time. The favors and strings she pulled happened hundreds of years ago. The reason I was dragged here was because of my great-great-great-grandfather's death. The prince she knew may be long in his grave, but his family's current royal status was all built off of favors from Lady Rosalind Nightshade.
Irinka turned a little more towards the boy with a confused frown.
That can't be,
she insisted.
He was a prince before she became a vampire.
She did not wait to become a vampire before she began trading favors, Irinka.
Derlin whispered, leaning even closer into their suspicious conversation.
Jincia used to be known as the unofficial capital of Milan. With it as her dowry, and no brothers to claim it once her father died, she needed to make a lot of friends.
Something in his tone changed, but Irinka missed it as she left the hidden protection of their hands cover for only a moment, to search the room for the topic of their conversation. She did not see the way he looked at her when he offered,
"It is always an advantage to have good friends."
Would my new friend tell me?
She mumbled, ducking back down when, instead of finding her mark, she found the Rose and her brother were watching them strangely.
What's a dowry?
Derlin seemed entirely taken off guard by the question, but he only laughed and found them each full glasses before graciously explaining. Irinka didn't particularly like the way that he seemed to be amused by her disgust at the very concept, but he did take the time to explain the ins and outs of it to her, and she eventually came around to say that she still thought that well-to-do people were weird about money. She told him how she got by before Lunrith and produced his very own pocket watch when he said he didn't believe her. He proclaimed to find her fingerwork astounding, and she allowed herself to drink in the praise. The music slowed, he downed his drink, and insisted that they attempt dancing one more time. It didn't go very well, but it was fun. At the peak of the party, the white rose had been lifted up atop her altar and given some long-winded speech about something or other that Irinka couldn't be bothered to listen to. Rose petals had fallen from the ceiling in a gaudy display, and the gathered thorns and pawns cheered like the woman had just performed some astounding miracle. An hour later, and Derlin directed Irinka's attention to Lady Rosalind, suspiciously sneaking her champion out of a side door. Irinka instantly jumped to her feet, and Lunrith caught her eye worriedly. Just before he was pulled away, he gestured 2 words to her.
Stay. Trap.
Sure, she was still irritated at him, but Irinka couldn't leave him after that. She tried to go after him, though her feet swayed beneath her, the combination of too much liquor and the crowd refusing to part for her to get through. The panic from the beginning of the night threatened at the edges of her vision, but Derlin was at her side before it could take hold, and he helped guide her through the throngs of people to the door where they had vanished. She had just passed the threshold when his hand on her tightened, and she was halted in her pursuit. Irinka didn't understand the betrayal until Derlin pointed out softly glowing wards weaved into the doorframe. He tried to get her to stay. His lack of membership in the cult made him unable to go with her. Pulling her back into the ballroom, he crowded her against a wall to hide their conversation.
If all you've told me is true, it could be dangerous,
he whispered just loud enough to be heard, worry for her clearly written all over his face and fear drenching his tone.
Please don't go.
I have to.
She pleaded desperately.
If the doctor told her I plan to ruin her party, you don't know how vindictive she is. She might hurt him.
Derlin's own worry reluctantly relented, and he smiled at her sadly.
How could I refuse you? You say things like that in such a desperate way. Promise me you will return, and I will let you go.
She promised she would. After a beat of indecision, he did as he said he would, and she ran. She wouldn't keep her promise. Old Mother Nonsense hums, picking a fruit from a branch near her. Somewhere in school, you learned that pomegranates can hang on through the winter, if the summer was long and warm. While this doesn't look like the tree they would usually grow on, most trees don't usually support it alongside oranges and red berries either. For the home of Old Mother Nonsense, though, it seems to make perfect sense. Will you tell us why she didn't keep her promise? You asked timidly, watching the woman tear the fruit and divide it up between the two of you. I can tell you that what Irinka saw that night, it gave her some insight into her brother's past. The woman shakes her head at your request, a past that sisters ought not to know. She at least has the decency to offer up an apologetic smile at your pout. If you return for another tale when you are grown, I will tell you what she saw to make her forget her promise. You nod, and the juice of the fruit is the sweetest you have ever tasted. Naturally, you devour it.